Guitar. It is the 9th day of January 2024, and you probably used half of your salary. December, you probably paid on the 20th of Kafraia, and you probably used half of it for December and the whole festivities. Right now, you're trying to see, with the little I have, how do I budget this? That takes me to the proverbial 60 days of January. Well, we are here with you to talk about this particular conversation, and they have the right minds. Trust you me, they're not new faces right here, and the right minds have this conversation. Purity Kimotho, entrepreneurship and business trainer. Karibu sana.
Asante.
And Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
I'm curious about, you've brought books, so we'll definitely be talking about, what is here and all this, the whole, personal budgeting. And another not new face here, Noali Kiara, finance consultant, Hekima Infinity Limited. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Stan.
Karibu tena.
Asante sana.
And before we actually begin this conversation, when you started, I didn't give an African proverb, but then this is a quote by William Feather, an American writer. He says, a budget tells us what we can't afford, but it doesn't keep us from buying it. Food for thought. We'll be discussing all that as we continue. But then let's just start from the whole bit of it. As someone who even trains people, what is the essence of a budget? Let's even start from there. How does a budget look like, first of all? Like your own kind of personal budget.
Thank you very much, and Happy New Year. I'm very glad to be here. I didn't expect to be here this early in the year. This is not a good time to be telling people about money, because it's a tricky question.
Oh, yes, they're looking at you and they're like, which money?
Yeah, which money, first of all? I mean, we spent all of it in December, but the truth is I have never understood why we spend all our money in December, seriously. Because for us to be talking about a budget in January means it's a 365 days, 12 months, again in a year. It should be a conversation we have every day, 30 days in a month. Because a budget ideally should guide you, should tell you what you can afford, just like you have said, and what you cannot afford. And sometimes actually you can afford something, but because that is not what you have planned to do at that point, then you have to postpone. There's a big problem we have, especially in the generations maybe that have come after me. The instant gratification is a big problem. But if you can't put it down in a budget, then it becomes very hard to know what should I do with what. For example, many years ago when I was still employed at Safaricom, I remember first, I was not earning a lot of money. But the fact that I was not used to earning that money made me think, I can't use all this money. And what did I do? I used to save quite a chunk in the circle. In fact, with my first salary, which was very literal, those days, I saved so much in the circle because I was not used to this money. But what do we do in Kenya? The more money you get, the more money you want. In fact, the needs are much more. Yes. I don't want to tell people not to spend on good things, because personally, what I do every morning, every day, 7 days a week, is sell cars. But on this platform, I want to tell you that buy what you can afford, seriously. And before you buy, put it down on paper. Because if you don't put it down, you'll be looking back and saying, what just happened? You should be saying, this is what should happen. Actually, a budget is telling your money where it should go. Yeah.
And I love the fact that you say put it down on paper.
Yes.
So Ikiara, so when are you supposed to be putting it down on paper? Now, let's even talk about now January. Yeah. The proverbial 60 days of January. Others say 100 days. So when should you start budgeting for, let's say, January specifically?
Yeah. So budgeting, as Purity said, is an everyday thing. And one thing we forget about budgeting is you could put a budget and say, this is my income, first of all, from my main hustle or side hustles, and these are my other expenses, which could be, there should be some needs and there's some wants and other things. So we need to also know what are our needs and what are our wants. Because as Purity said, the more money you get, the more wants that are there. Yeah. So you should do it ideally, and it's good talking about this in January, you can do a 1-year cycle. So for example, you do a monthly budget, but you budget for all the income and expenses you expect in the whole year. And this is, remember, it's an expectation. You're making assumptions about your salary increments and side hustles, your expenses. But remember also the unexpected expenses. And that's why I think emergency funds are very important as well to budget for. But personally, what I also do for myself, though I'm an accountant as well, and I also get shocked by my own expenditure, is to track my actual expenditure on an app that I use. Because you can budget and say, this month I'll only spend 20K on entertainment.
Right.
But when you actually write it on paper or now on an app, and then you see, you might find it's 50K and you can't believe it. And me, I'm an accountant. So you see, there's a two leg. There's the budgeting, but there's also tracking it. That's very important. Otherwise, you could get yourself in a lot of problems.
So that means when the clock strikes midnight, and we're all celebrating the Happy New Year, you already need to have a budget in hand, and you say, well, January has started. This is what I had already planned months ago, and all that.
Yes.
Kira.
Yeah, and ideally, if it's something you start doing, the first time it's difficult, but once you do it and get used to it, the next year you just roll over. You just say, okay, this year, am I targeting to make more income? Am I targeting to maybe buy a new car and all that? You need to build some business. You buy a new car, you need to know budget for that, and maybe even have a separate savings for that, so that you do it. And what she said about SACCOs is very important, because also my first job, I joined a SACCO, and the beauty about SACCOs, it's like a forced saving.
Yeah, true.
If you're broke and you go to a SACCO and say, I want my deposits back, they tell you, you take it and you also leave as a member, and you think twice. As opposed to money in the bank or M-Pesa, you can easily pull it out.
Right. He mentioned something about tracking down what you're spending and all that. And I wanted to have this conversation later on, but then because you brought it, and before we actually forget about it, others say that it's easier for them to track how they're spending. Well, they had budgeted with what they have in cash on a Toko wallet. This is 1,000 bob. Nilibai hii, nikanunua mboga, nini. I tracked that. Others say, well, it's easier tracking via let's say the liquid money, M-Pesa, etc. Because maybe they can see the messages and see, okay, I spent this, I spent it. In your experience, which is better, practically speaking? Tracking down what you're spending and what is in the budget?
I have a formula I like using, because first, employ investments. Luckily, I did accounting as in my bachelor's, it was my major. So I think that helps us also, but that does not exclude us from the struggle, just like he has said. The truth is, I tell people, what are you earning? Let's call it 100%. Take 60% of that money and use it. Whatever you'll use it on, now that is where the budget comes. 20% of that money, and now I've promoted it to 25% because of inflation of many things. Please put aside that money. You put aside that money first to save, and then invest that money so that it can also generate what we call passive income. It calls for serious discipline for you to be able to do that. Now, the other 10, if you're a Christian, you do your thing, you know what that means. Whatever you are, or if you means giving to back to the society. Then there's another 10 or 5% that we rarely talk about. It's called the black tax.
The black tax, yes.
I'll be doing a whole book on black tax, but for now I have these two. One is to teach you how to make money. It's called 70 Rules and Realities of learning a business, a successful business. And these other one is liquid ways to invest your money in Kenya. These are Kenyan books.
I actually had a whole conversation on investing the whole liquid assets, but we'll get to that.
Exactly. So when we come back to budgeting, remember we are at 60%. So first, if you're earning 100,000, we are talking about 60,000. So what is your rent in there? What is the budget for school fees for us who have kids? But if you work backward and say, let me spend money and then track, it's really a very tricky thing. I like that he has an app. I don't have an app because I work forward. I first put away the money, then I have so little left out, and I really don't have much to use it on. I have to use it on the basics. So I think that is a good way to start, if it works for you. Now, the 60, 20, 10, 10 does not necessarily mean it has to work for you. Imagine a billionaire, they end up investing or saving much more than a normal, but here we are talking about normal Kenyans, you know. Someone who's earning 30K, 40K, 100K, 20K, whatever it is you earn. Put it in your mind that you must put money aside, because the truth is, emergencies will come. They must come. People will fall sick in our family. There are people who need, like right now, in the next few weeks, you have many people calling you. They are taking kids to school and there is no money. Those are realities of life. But if we do not work forward, on our budgets, then those things can be hard. If you're earning 100,000, you should actually plan to give 10,000 of that 100K every month. Not just give out, but budget. Because if you do not budget, people will keep asking from you, and sometimes you actually do not have that money. Now, once you have already spent out that 10% on giving people, or if you don't spend, of course, you save it and give it next time. If you have already spent rather all the money you had allocated to give, you should just say actually you don't have, or you're not in a position to, especially if it's not an emergency.
Right.
Yeah.
And Ikera, this is one common formula that I think most people would use when they have that money without even touching it. They've probably paid and they're like, all right, let me save this. Kwanza nieke kando, nifunga macho. Then the other one, they save and, they spend on something else on the same. But then, practically speaking, so how do you budget now matters the priority, because I'm pretty sure this is something that both of you will be popping up,
Sure.
Budget the priority, the basics on that, but then how do you now actually do that and ensure that by the time even January comes, these priorities have been met? Sure.
So one of the things that also try to do as well, especially if it's good for a family budget, if you have a spouse or partner, is to have a budget for the household, but you can also adapt it for your own self. Typically, an Excel spreadsheet is good to use because it does all the formulas for you. But ideally, you'd have your incomes that you have in your household or yourself monthly. Typically, that's your salary. So you could either put that as your net salary or your gross salary, but then remember to deduct all the taxes and all that. And then you have your expenses. Now, this is where the challenge now becomes, especially if it's a household.
Right.
How do you prioritize? Because what is priority for Noel and what is priority for Purity, for example, might be very different. And that also can lead to conflict. But the good thing about the budgeting, and we say numbers don't lie, it will show you whether you can afford it or can't afford it, because it's a simple formula. Total income, less total expenses. If the total income is more, you have a surplus that can either go into savings or funds or other things or projects, or if you have a deficit, then the numbers don't lie. There's no magically that money will come from anywhere. So the question is, can we improve our incomes, which you can say is maybe harder, or can we reduce our expenses? And now that's where comes the needs and wants. So what is a need for Noel is not a need for Purity or for Stanley, and vice versa. And that's why the budget is good, because you avoid conflict, because you see those things are factual, and you can't say saying someone is being, a spendthrift or a miser, because you just look at that and ask yourselves questions, including, for example, rent and food and school fees. Those are needs. The question is now, what kind of place or rent can we afford? What kind of food can we afford? What kind of school can we afford? That's not the questions where it helps now to narrow down that. And then typically you'd have that on a monthly basis. And then every month you see whether you're making, whether there's a surplus or a deficit. Now, that's the thing. Remember, that's a budget. This is what you're expecting, but there's the actual expenditure. Yeah, fuel has gone up. We saw that. If you've budgeted fuel based on, let's say, 2 years ago, that number is not correct. School fees are also going up. Everything is going up, and that's why inflation is a major issue that needs to be looked at, and that's why tracking actual expenses. And if your mother calls you and she's sick and she needs money, you have to give it. But it has to be documented. Then when you look at the end of that month, this is what you had budgeted for, what I'd expected. This is actually what we spent. You may have a saving or a deficit. And then the question is, how do we, and now things like debt come into play.
All right.
Do you have an appetite for credit cards, loans, which is now you get into some other uncharted waters.
All right.
And that's why the budget is key, to keep you, to know what's happening. Because many people look at their bank account and think, I have money. But if you have a loan or a credit card, there's something else you're not seeing there. And that's why it's important, the budget will tell you the real truth.
And now this means, obviously, if someone's lifestyle has to change, what they were doing, where they were shopping, let's say even in December, will probably change even in January. I was talking to a few people even yesterday, preparing for this conversation, probably telling me, let's say in December, when they had probably money, they'd go to a particular supermarket and buy, the basics, the food prices, and now in most, as you're saying, people in a family, let's say in a family of 5, they probably buy certain basics in bulk.
Yeah.
But then right now, they'd probably prefer to just go for ile kadogo, ile mama pima if it's cooking oil, buying ile kidogo kidogo so that you actually budget for that probably in a week and then say, wacha tumalize wiki tuone venye next week will be. Talk on that. And even as you do, I did the whole due diligence of actually, for the viewer, taking a look at particular various products. So cooking oil right now, for our 5-liter cooking oil, it ranges from 1,649 to 1,840. Rice 5 kg, 1,710, ranging others 1,817, others 1,599. Salt 2 kg is about 67 bob. Sugar 5 kg is 1,055 basically, and maize flour 5 kg is 399. So with this in mind, how will you advise, practically speaking?
First of all, like I had said before, I don't know why we put so much emphasis on December. I think because most of my working years, Christmas was a working day. Yeah. I don't feel much vibe around spending so much around Christmas. And it's something we must train ourselves as Kenyans, because if you want to spend extra in December, then you must have planned it in the past months, so that does not affect you January. Now, Kenya is typically an economy, a kadogo economy, for real. Very few people, even when we are told to buy in bulk, the truth is very few people can even afford to do that, because if you tell me to buy a whole bale of unga and rice and all that, that is a lot of money. That and also it can lead to people, over-indulging. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it can lead to people over-indulging. Now, why I like economy kadogo is because you work within your budget. Think about a guy who is going to a mjengo who earns, let's say, 600 to 700 shillings. So if they go to the shopkeeper, they buy food for that day, or maximum 2 days. And it's very easy to track your expenditure if that is how you're working. I am not encouraging that, but it's the reality. If you look at the biggest percentage of Kenyans, actually, I don't know how we survived 2023. I think Kenyans are extremely resilient. Oh, yes. I really want to commend them for that. We thought we were going to break, and of course, many people are in trouble right now because of debt and other things, but trust me, we are going to come out of it. What we need to do is just accept where we are. We have an issue right now of people, are they called wannabes? There's a lot of that nowadays. You want to be seen holidaying in Diani, in Dubai, and wherever, because you saw someone there. But you don't understand, you don't know their story. Let's start there. So let's just stick to our lanes. Because that person you saw, you don't even know them most of the time. And even if you know them, they don't care. So what matters is that, did you wake up? Do you have some boga and ugari for your family? That is the most important thing. So besides talking about whether we should go the bulk or the kadogo way, it's about our pocket. And one more thing, I'm just coming from Dallas, Texas. I think I came 2 days ago. And one of the things that amazed me about Kenyans is the way we think certain jobs are not good jobs. They're not, they don't suit us. Even those who are not very learned, they think I can't clean for a living. Yet, when you go out there, you discover people are doing everything to earn a living. And what here we would ideally call not classy job is what out there makes people money. I think as Kenyans, as much as we are saying we have many economic problems, we're in a recession, the dollar really has harassed us and all that, if we worked, there may not be enough jobs in Kenya. Maybe there will never be. But if we working is available. We have a lot of work in Kenya. If we focus on work, and working to earn a living. And if we start honoring work and saying work is dignified, doesn't matter what, whether it's a cleaner or whatever, then we'll first come out of the problems we are in, so that we have enough money even to talk about budgeting here. Right.
And Kiara, still on the same, I'm curious your thoughts. Should we go, or will you advise someone to go the bulk way, someone in a family setup, the bulk or the economic kadogo?
Yeah. I'd say the bulk has its benefits in terms of especially discounts, but unless you are, it requires a lot of discipline, because one of the things is, first of all, if you're buying a bale of unga, that means there's a huge amount of cash outflow you're putting out, which means And there's something also, let's talk about business, but also it affects individuals. When you say cash is king, you could be running a profitable business, but if you don't have cash, your business will die, because if you can't pay suppliers, you can't pay workers, your business shuts down. So there's an important aspect of cash flow. And when you buy in bulk, it means you're taking out more cash that ideally you don't need right then, because you're getting a discount. If there's no discount, I would say there's no point doing that. But if there's a discount, maybe you can do the math. But then now discipline comes in, because, as Purity said, when people see abundance, they might start to misuse. Others might steal. You get. So now it requires a serious level of discipline to buy in bulk. So given the economic realities that are there now, I would say that possibly only those households that maybe have enough cash flow, they do go the bulk way. But those who maybe are on the brink, maybe need to use the kadogo kind of thing, because that way it also enforces discipline. Yeah, I only have 1,000 shillings. I can only buy X. So your child is telling you they want, I don't know, a chocolate bar, and you just tell them no.
Hakuna pesa.
But now, yeah, and so for me that is very important. But yeah, you can look at the pros and cons, but I would say right now, the bulk one, I think, will only suit those households that have enough cash to take advantage of those discounts. But otherwise, it might be a strain, because as you said in January, yeah, it's literally everything is competing. School fees is
and before we take a short break, just a follow up on the same, briefly, a minute or so. When I was taking a look at these prices, some of these commodities might take you more than a month or so.
Sure.
Okay, I'm being told we take a short break, but then even afterwards, some of these products, as much as they can take you more than a month, when you compare that and the economic kadogo, which one makes sense at the end of the day, if you factor in, if you're to buy kidogo by the end of the month? Food for thought, even as you take this particular short break. You're watching Morning Cafe. How are you budgeting your 100 days, quote unquote, proverbial, of January? Stick around. business, and this particular morning giving you some tips and hacks on how to have your personal budget. It's January, so we understand the troubles that you might be in on trying to craft that particular budget right now. And seeing I was paid back in 20th of December, and I'm trying to see what goes where, what goes where. And before the break, I was asking you, Kiara, I mean, we're taking a look at, in case you're just joining us right now, taking a look at some particular products, the basics that you'll find in your kitchen, for example, cooking oil, rice, salt, sugar, maize flour, that range in different prices if you're going to buy them in bulk. Let's say, for example, the maize flour, a 5 kg costing $3.99. But then that's in bulk. So in a family of, let's say, 5, they probably use it, let's say, in a span of maybe 2-3 weeks, depending on how much the usage is. Comparing to the whole economic adogo, they probably just buy, let's say, for every week.
Yeah.
Which one, putting matters, the discipline constant, which one makes sense at the end of the day?
Okay, I think if you're assuming that the individual household is disciplined, the bulk one does have its benefits because of discounts. So if you have the cash up front to pay for it, it can work. However, what I've seen is that discipline is what many of us do not have, and you might find that that discount that you're trying to get, that saving, is lost in terms of maybe waste or a bit of stealing here and there. So. But generally, yes, those bulk ones have discounts, but requires a high level of discipline, including budgeting, including, for example, if you bought that, let's say, 5 kilos or 10 kilos, you almost have to now, again, PIMA for the household and say, today, only using this. So you need someone almost controlling that, which, now it becomes, in the household, it becomes too dictatorial, but it requires kind of controls, I would say, for it to make sense. Because, for example, personally, there's a time my former landlord, would allow me to, if I paid several months in advance, he gives me an extra month free. So you can imagine that's a huge amount of cash outflow if you have it, but it's a saving of a whole month's rent. So you have to look at the math, because if you use all your money on that and you can't pay school fees, it's not worth it, because children have to go to school, for example. So that kind of balancing requires a high level of, let's say, discipline or experience in personal finance to be able to do such things. Right. Yeah.
Let's tackle something that both of you have mentioned here: borrowing. And this is going to be the elephant in the room for this particular January. First of all, can you budget? Because you're talking about you're budgeting because you're seeing it here. You have this money, so you're budgeting it. But can you budget for something that you don't really have? You're thinking, let me borrow this. Let me borrow amount X so that I can now budget. Purity.
Well, debt is very dear to me. Actually, I have taken a course with CASNEP called Certified Credit Professional. I'm actually a CCPK. There's something like that, by the way. So why debt is important to me is because in our economy, what we do with debt is actually what determines how far or how behind we stay. First, I have two ways of looking at debt. If you use debt and it propels you forward, that's a good debt. Why not? If you are employed and you get what they call unsecured loans, or rather it's secured by your salary, and for you to get, let's say, for example, to buy a car, it will need you to save for 3 years. It makes sense for you to take a loan and use a car, But where I have a problem is where you buy for consumables, you borrow for consumables, and then keep borrowing to keep paying. It's a very, very tricky space we are in. You can imagine the number of investors who have come to Kenya to give people what we call mobile loans, and very cheap loans, very easy to get loans, but very, very expensive. In the last few months, I have had an experience to meet people who have been victims of those debts, for me, which don't make sense. And I felt really bad that you can borrow very little money and end up paying more than 10 times that amount in 2 months. It's crazy. So, well, I cannot advise you to borrow for food, but unless you're in a very, very bad place. And unless you're mtu wa mjengo, let's, for example, say that you need unga today and you're going for kibarua tomorrow, so you can pay if it's that bad. But if it hasn't gotten there, seriously. And most of the people you find, they haven't been that low you know, this thing of, I don't know whether you have tried sending someone money and they told you, usitume kwa hiyo, iko na fuliza. That culture, I must say, it's horrible. I have written a whole blog, I like writing about money, on M-Shwari. You can look at M-Shwari as a curse, for example, or as an economic catalyst. And this is how I look at it. M-Shwari charges about, is it 9% per month? Let's just assume it's 9%. So one person takes 1,000 bob on Monday and go buy food or a nice pair of shoe, and pesa imeisha hivyo. And then at the end of the month, you have to figure out where you'll get this 1,000 to pay back, because you can't even see what you bought. Hata kiatu imeanza kuparara. And then another one takes that 1,000, things are really thick, goes to Marikiti and buys bananas. I think they sell 5 bob. If you buy many, then you sell those bananas. Where you sell now, that's a whole topic, that's a whole book on marketing. And then you have 1,000 bob, you go to Marikiti or you combine and buy something, even shirts for 100 bob, and then sell. I expect by the end of the week, you have actually recovered this 1,000. You're not paying, remember, you're paying at the end of the month. And so you keep turning over that money until the end of the month. And then you actually should have been able to make just 3,000 bob. All things held constant at the end of 30 days. So you can see, one person went, used the money, and he's over. The other person, the same 1,000 was able to repay and make money. I have used M-Shwari because it's the most easiest example to use. So the same way with other credit facilities available, whether it's a bank loan, whether it's a loan from a microfinance, it depends on actually what you do with debt. But I must say, as a country already, we must pay debts. Kenyans, by the way, will borrow you money not to pay back. They borrow money never to repay.
Oh, yes.
So you'll find people, relatives, friends, the friendship died a long time ago just because of debt.
And sorry to cut you short, because you mentioned that, I'm curious, Kiara, because right now there's so many lending apps. Right now, you could just go and download and register real quick and start accessing. Kidogo, then the next time they tell you, well, you've qualified now, next time you can actually borrow this amount of money. But then people would feel like it will actually be stress-free going to a particular lending app. They don't ask me a lot of questions, rather than going to a particular friend or a relative, to borrow. How will you advise, tackling all this?
It's very complicated, and I was also a banker at some point. So credit and money, sometimes it's almost like, I wouldn't say magic, but when it comes to credit, especially now the interest rates are north of 20%, I think, for most average people. If you can avoid it, just avoid it. And especially, as Pete said, there's something called good and bad debt. And of course, when you're taking debt, you think it's good, but the question is, what is the purpose for that credit? If it's for consumption, and consumption, I mean here expenses, even school fees, for example, you need to be very worried, because unless you know where your income is coming from, or there's an asset you're selling, there's a train crash up ahead. And so the way I said, buying in bulk requires discipline. Now credit now is a higher level of discipline, because now we are all humans and we all have, influencers around us telling us, let's buy this. And if you have a credit card, you have a hustler fund, you have a M-Shwari. Money is literally at your fingertips. And there's nothing like free money. And that's what, even in banking. In banking, we sell money. We're selling money. So ideally, the good debt is that which is supposed to lift you, or go into some form of, let's say, investment in a business, as she said. And even before you invest in that business again, like now, I even have some friends who we discuss about business, and they tell me not to go into this farming and that. I say, why that? What are the margins? Where are you going to sell? As she said, for me, that thing drives me. You can create the best product, but selling it and where to sell it is now completely another art of its own. So debt is not, and I say, even money is not good or bad. It's how you use it, and but it requires, because even professors and other people, you find they get into problems. So it requires a certain understanding and attitude towards money, and also self-control. Let me now go into maybe a bit of preaching, yeah, because without self-control, especially in money matters, it becomes very, very difficult, because you might, as you've said, right now we are blessed in terms of these resources at our fingertips.
Oh, yes.
But it means you could also misuse them and all that. So it requires, now budgeting is very key, because now when you do your budget and you see, these are my income, these are my expenses, we are short, we have a deficit. Can I increase my income? Maybe no. Can I reduce my expenses? Yes, which ones? There's some you might find you can't even reduce. So the question is, if you take debt to cover that deficit, what are you doing to, especially now income-wise, to plug it back very, very quickly? Yeah, because, you know, during the time of interest capping, 13%, we were more or less could survive the debt. But now with north of 20%, and that's from a commercial bank. Yeah. The apps probably, who knows what APR are on that. It's literally a hole that you cannot get out of. So what I would say in this, if you can avoid it, especially if you don't have experience in it. And that's why even in credit appraisal, you look at past behavior of the borrower in how they've been borrowing. That tells you whether that person has the attitude and intention to pay. Because I said many people actually borrow with the intention not to pay, which is, I'd say, evil actually. Right. But there's an aspect of, and that's why debt, what I would recommend to someone is start with small debt to test whether you're good at it or not. If you're not good at it, avoid it.
And one thing that now people would probably do to avoid, going into that hole of debt, borrowing and all that, is probably now looking for something to generate more income. Probably they earn, let's say, 45,000 a month, but then they have a car. They're like, so how do I use some of these resources around me to generate more income? Give us some tips and hacks to use whatever we have because you've budgeted, but then you saw whatever you budgeted for basic needs, ni kama haitatosha at the end of the day. So how now do I generate more?
It's something Noel has said. Many times we have only two options. If you have many things to do and you don't have money, either you cut on those things or you make more money. And I think personally, because I'm business oriented, it's easier to make more money. It's easier to make more money in our country using entrepreneurship. But this means you have to strip down that white collar job, blue collar job mentality.
Mindset, yeah.
Noel and I have been to school. We have worked for top corporates. But here we are now in business, right? He may tell you, I have been out here, I think, 12 years since I left the real corporate. And one of the things you must do for you to succeed is to be ready to wear gumboots. If you're not ready to wear gumboots, and go where the money is, because the money will not find you.
Basically, get your hands dirty.
Yes, get your hands very dirty. Yeah. That is what will save this country. We are purely on 60-70% SME are the ones that run our economy. I think they are the guys who contribute to employment, to even our GDP, for example. And as much as we are complaining, KRA is on us and down there on SMEs, I'm playing that the government will give us good governance, and then we'll pay tax, and then they will serve us, and then they'll give us a good environment to do business. Because this economy in Kenya is run by small businesses people. The mama boga, the mama wa marikiti, the mama wa, those are the ones they are the employers here, because they have two people, someone has two. I have my 3 people have employed, washing cars, they are selling cars. That is how this economy runs. We don't have many jobs with the government, many jobs in the corporate, like Safaricom, where we worked, or where he worked in the bank and management consultant sorting companies. We don't have those jobs. If you're looking to increase or to be able to manage your budget, think of what else you can sell, even if it's jugu karanga, seriously, even if it's honey. Even if it's carrying something in the office, to just sell to your colleagues, it's that basic. There's no magic in this. Personally, when I left employment, all the way from, wearing suits, nowadays it feels even funny to be in a suit, but we do wear them so that customers can trust us. But the truth is, one of the things I sold most was earrings. Do you know earrings? And the truth is, I would make 2 times my gross salary on earrings in a month. But I didn't know that. I had to leave work and go do that stuff in Du Bois. There's a street called Du Bois, by the way, in Nairobi. Did you know that? Du Bois Road. Yes. That is where earrings come from. Anyway, so I don't want to focus more on the budget and why you can't do things. Get out of your comfort zone and do something. If you have a small piece of land and you know you can plant sukuma wiki and sell to your neighbors, please go and do exactly that. Nobody is coming to save Kenya. We are the ones who are going to save this country.
And now getting out of your comfort zone, there's something you mentioned about investing in liquid assets and all that. Ikera, first of all, is it a viable option in some of this, in such a hard economic time as we are in right now? And how do you, first of all, get into it?
Okay, I think Purity has mentioned a lot of things there. Something I wanted to mention before we finish is there's something called the balance sheet. We think of companies have balance sheets, but even individuals, you have balance sheets. You have assets and you have liabilities. Some of those are intangible or not tangible. So for example, now when I speak to resources generally, because we focus on money, but we forget God has given us other resources that I would say are more valuable than money, like our time. I say all of us have 24 hours in a day. Whether you're President Ruto, Bill Gates, Stanley Noel, an employed person in Kibera, a student, you have 24 hours in a day. What can you do with that time? Then you also have your ideas, your talents, yeah? So, and for me, most of my work has, before I went into, even now as a consultant, has been selling my time or my ideas and all that. Other people are very good at selling items, for example, that people need and able to know, like you found out earrings, you get very good money from that. For me, one of the things that has been a realization is that the cosmetic industry has a lot of high margins. And I saw even with the economy the way it is now, ladies still want to buy that. And for me, because now I've also, though I had a mindset as an employee for most of my working life, now I have a mindset of an entrepreneur. And as what Purity said is, wherever I see opportunity at a high margin, I don't care what it is. And that's why for me, cosmetics, for example, I've just seen that is, even in this economy, people are still buying those cosmetics. Even gentlemen, I saw them buying cologne. Those small ones, those ones you refill. Yeah. So I was like, this could be, and therefore, then that's what we require, because with our time and our ideas, you can create wealth. And wealth and money is also another topic. Those are different things. We need to be creating wealth, and that speaks to our balance sheet as well. Yeah. And so for me, as you do your budgeting, for example, also build your balance sheet. Do I have assets that are building me up? You talked about a car. A car, there's a debate there whether it's an asset or whether it earns you money or not. It's a convenience, yes. But if you're just saying, if you're to send it out to Uber or taxi or whatever, it could become an asset. So you need to list all your assets. I have a car. I have some land. Yeah. Even I have a nanny, for example. This nanny, if she's idle, can I deploy her to some work? Like now, my household, as well, sometimes when she's idle, I send her to the farm to dig, and then like now I'm eating skooma from my small cash. So those are the things you need to think. What resources do I have around me? Social capital, my networks. I'm sure, like Stanley, you have very good networks in your phone book of people who could either help you start a business or connect you. That is another form of resources that you can tap into. And then the money follows. You see, money, now we put on my economist hat, money is a medium of exchange. It's not in itself supposed to be valuable. And that's why I would say, when it comes to a question about liquid assets, in my own view now, the way the inflation is, I would advise people not to hold money that they don't need. They need to put it in either a business that is profitable or in assets that will store wealth, like property and the like. Because the inflation and the dollar are eroding cash in the bank that maybe you don't need to be sitting there. Of course, you need some cash to, pay stuff. But having too much cash now, in my view, is not advisable based on what's happening internationally, even with the dollar, with China and BRICS trying to create a new currency and inflation. If you can shift it to, like I was saying, like now she's talking about earrings. If the margins are very good, why not shift resources there? And now with technology, you can sell earrings WhatsApp, on your whatever. You don't have to. That's the beauty about technology. That's another resource, free of charge again, that we've been given, that we can. So there's so many resources outside of money that we need to open our mind to see.
All right. And then now expound more on this, because I'm curious on your thoughts on investing. Break it down for a viewer who's watching us. They're probably, well, starting off at a salary of maybe 30,000 and all that, or even less than that, maybe even 10,000. So they're wondering, we're talking about investing in, liquid assets. Yeah. What are these, first of all? What are some of these kind of assets that I can really get into? As much as, he's expounded on some of them, but what are some of those that are really just around us for a young person that they can really get on?
Thank you. I like two things he has mentioned, and one of them is time. We never think about time as a resource, but time is more important than money. In fact, if you should actually be able to value what is your per hourly value, and say, I'm worth this much per hour. So that when someone calls you, can we have lunch? Can we have tea? Please check, I'm worth 2,000, and then go ahead and have that coffee. I do that because I have children to take care of. So sometimes I wonder, should I spend this one or this person or with my children? And your guess is as good as mine. I will most likely spend it with my children. So this is it. Kenya, we have huge resources, and one of them is human resource. And in terms of time, we have a lot of idleness here, unfortunately, and that can be converted to production, and that will help this country. The other thing he mentioned is social capital and networks. Networking is so powerful. I belong to a networking organization called BNI. It's an international thing. I will not talk about it much. You can go check it online, bni.com, where I refer you business without you giving me anything. But you have to say, what are you looking for? So there we are trained how to pitch our businesses and ourselves. Let's say I'm looking for NYS to buy cars from my business, which is Urban Drive. I'll mention it, and people will direct me to how to get to NYS. If it's bidding, how do I do that? That is networking and social capital. It's very, very powerful and can help many businesses. Now back to liquid ways to invest. We have been made as Kenyans to believe that land is the only place you should invest, or bloti, maguta. We have been told at 60 you must do a high rise of flats. But I like helping people do mathematics. I'm not saying not to do that. And then I have lived on Kiaburu for a while, and I feel very sad to see old grannies in their 60s, 70s who walk without shoes. And when you look at them, they have also not had a good meal, but they are worth millions, 50 million worth in those buildings we have talked about. That shosho cannot even afford flutes. They cannot afford in quotes, even a good meal. Let's be genuine. Okay. And I feel sad because they can as well liquidate that asset because they're in their 60s and 70s, and then put that money where it will give them monthly income that they can now live a comfortable life. Unfortunately, when God takes them away, the grandchildren, not even the children, the following day they come to Urban Day, we are the ones who sell them very good cars. You look at the person buying the car, and then you're wondering, where did they get the money? That's just a joke. But what I recommend, especially to people who are joining employment, who are starting off businesses, SACCO is a good place to start. I think most of them require to save only 1,000. We have things like money market. Standard Chartered has a product called Shilingi, Standard Shilingi. It's a money market which you can put only 500 shillings. Mobile, eh? Mobile. You can do it on your phone. Then go to just normal money market fund managers like ICA, Lion. We have CIC. Very awesome. You can put your even 500 shillings, 1,000. The money you get, just keep putting there, so that when you need that money, you can easily get it. But again, like he keeps saying, there is no way we can inject a nini on you to be disciplined. That is something you just. And now
that's now my final bit, even for your final thoughts, both of you, as you give us your final thoughts. I'll start with you. How now do you really maintain that fiscal discipline? Right now in January, it's about over 50, less than 50 weeks to December. We'll be back here to have this conversation, December 2024, so that, time unangalia, how much did I even save? So how can you really maintain that fiscal discipline all this while? I'll start with you briefly.
I like giving a very interesting way of disciplining yourself. If you have issues with discipline, number one, try and fast. Try deny yourself food. Because discipline is about denying yourself something. I call it delayed gratification, which you all know about. If you wanted to buy a shoe and you can't afford it and you have to borrow from whichever, sleep over it, ask yourself, can I buy that thing twice? Do I have that money to buy it now and again? You know, if you can't do that, leave it. Discipline is very personal, and it's something we have to inculcate in us so that we can get there. If you can you take 5 kilometers, you know, walk every day? Those are things that are very basic. If you can't, then there's a problem with discipline. So first work on yourself as a person before you go to money, because what we do with money is mostly what is already inside us. It is just the expression of our inside. Just that money, you know, the people say money brings out the true person in you, whether you have it or not. Or not. So for discipline, I say if you have issues with the personal discipline, try to go a few days or skip a few meals.
That you can actually learn the whole.
Yeah.
There's a lot to say, but I'd say practically, which goes to discipline, we've been told to tighten our belts, and that is literally the case. We need to do that. Inflation now is what, about they say 6%. I would say your expenditure from last year, cut it by 10%, for example, just to cover inflation. Let me say that. But as Purity said, there's only so much you can cut. Focus now on making more income. There's so much you can do if you apply your mind to it. If you just open up your eyes and you see Kenya as a, let's say, a developing country, there's so many opportunities in so many sectors. Yeah. So open up your mind to do that, and also put a target. Can I increase my income by X%? Whether or not you're formally working or otherwise, I think that's that way you can do it. And also use like apps, as I said, to track your budgeting and the like. Yeah. Right.
Thank you. Thanks both of you, Purity, Kimotho, entrepreneurship and business trainer, as well as Noel Ikera, finance consultant at Hekima Infinity Limited. And Asante to you for sticking around. Food for thought, how you're really budgeting your money for this particular 100 days proverbial January. Remember that particular top story on the car crash in Nakuru Eldoret Highway. We'll be having live update from Chichi Josephine, on Nakuru correspondent on the same. And just a mention on the same right now, being told according to the police, 38